the end is in sight, Noga.
Good to see you, James. Well, it seems it is. It's hard to make it feel real.
Yes.
And it feels so sudden, but it does seem, even if the end of the war isn't exactly upon us, but it seems that the beginning of the end of the war has started. The ceasefire actually went into effect, believe it or not, a few minutes ago at noon on the hour Cairo time. We haven't yet seen pictures of the signatures on the documents, but we were informed that the ceasefire has gone into effect, and that the Israeli hostages, the remaining hostages, apparently both those still alive and the dead, should be released. We're hearing different things, but in the 48-hour period between Saturday and Monday, they should all be freed. And the United States and Qatar have offered firm guarantees to Hamas that Israel will not restart the war. I hope you can see me.
Yeah, I can see crystal clear. Don't worry. Don't press any more buttons. You've gone upside. There we are. You're back.
Anyway, absolute guarantees that Israel cannot restart the war once the hostages are freed, which is, I'll remind you what happened last March with a very similar agreement. Israel walked away from phase 2 at that time. So right now, there are guarantees that Israel can't do that again.
I mean, you can't really answer this question. Nobody can. But that obviously, you've answered the question I was about to ask you, is what has changed? What has changed most obviously is that the White House have offered guarantees that Israel will not resume its attacks after the hostages have been released. There will be an awful lot of people wondering whether Donald Trump's word can be trusted, won't there?
Yes, I think a few other things have changed. I think that it's fair to say that the pressure Qatar is exerting on Hamas, and not just Qatar. Qatar and its partners in Turkey, in Saudi Arabia, in the United Arab Emirates, even Jordan and Lebanon signed on to these deals. So there is vast pressure on Hamas to call it a day, to just end the war. That's one thing that has changed. And another thing that's changed, I guess even two other things, James. One is that the United States offered Qatar an almost NATO-like pact of security, so that what this means de facto is that whichever Hamas members, leaders, commanders end up in exile in Doha, in Qatar, as they have in the past, they basically have lifetime immunity now, also guaranteed by the United States. That is a very serious win for them. And the other thing is that apparently, as a result of Israel's failed effort to eliminate the Hamas leadership in Doha, in Qatar, just last month, the White House really got into gear. And so there has also been extraordinary pressure from the part of Donald Trump and the White House team on Prime Minister Netanyahu. My understanding is that neither side had really any wiggle room, that to a certain extent, these talks in Sharm el-Sheikh, in this Egyptian resort, have been a little bit forced, because the United States has basically come in like a sheriff and said, this is the deal. Now, there are also dangers hidden here, James, because of course, a Trump-style deal has several principles, but is short on details. And this could also quite quickly complicate matters when each side claims, no, but we thought it meant this, or we thought it meant that. This isn't yet completely,
sure,
a certain piece.
Nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, which was a phrase that was popular during the Northern Ireland peace process. Where does it leave Netanyahu? Well, actually, before that, we know that Smotrich has already revealed that he's not going to vote for this deal when the Israeli cabinet convenes in about an hour and 20 minutes' time. There's no prospect of him being on the winning side in that meeting, is there?
I don't think so. The cabinet actually is convening surprisingly late, in about 4 hours.
Oh, okay.
I don't exactly know why, but that said, the ceasefire has already gone into effect. So again, we're seeing a situation where the cabinet vote, which will include a vote on those Palestinian prisoners to be released, seems to be a little bit pro forma. But Smotrich, this very ultra ultra-extremist right-wing finance minister. He and his ministers, the ministers representing his party, will vote against it, as will the Interior Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir and his ministers. One of Smotrich's women, Orit Struk, has demanded that the party leave the government, but none of this seems to be having an impact. The Smotrich is not taking his party out of the government for now. I think they all want to be able to take some credit for the joy that will come the minute Israelis actually get to see their hostages out and free.
That's going to be an incredible moment.
I don't think anyone will quit. Sorry?
That will be a truly incredible moment, won't it?
Yes, and I'm gearing up for it. You know, after, just personally, as a journalist, after so many long months of covering misery and more misery, I look forward to being able to cover this crucial moment with the liberation of the final Israelis held by Hamas after more than 2 years.
That's an incredible moment. I mean, it'd be very hard to put it into words, but I know if anybody can, you can, Noga. Where does all this leave Netanyahu?
Well, it's unclear. Netanyahu really did have this agreement strong-armed on him. When he got to the White House last Monday, let's remember that he had just given a speech at the UN the Friday before, so we're talking 10 days ago, in which he said that we're not done yet, the job's not done, and we're going to finish it up. The war's continuing. That was Friday. By Monday, he was in the White House. He was given an apology to read to the Qatari Prime Minister, handed this by Donald Trump. I would say in a fairly humiliating situation, forced to read out a pre-written apology for this failed strike on that breached Qatari sovereignty, even though it didn't aim at Qatari individuals. And then he was taken to a press conference with Donald Trump where he said, I accept the premises. So these were the 20 principles. This is not where Netanyahu wants to be. And now what's happening, what we see happening, he's trying to parlay this into his own victory. So he says that the only reason we have achieved such a wonderful, marvelous deal is because of the military pressure that he insisted on. And I don't know whether or not Israelis will believe it. They might. But the fact of the matter is this deal was available to Israel about 18 months ago, presented by Joe Biden. Substantially the same deal.
Don't say that. Don't say that in Donald Trump's hearing, will you?
Today it's Donald Trump. And apparently Israel's expecting Donald Trump's envoys and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and the envoy, Steve Witkoff, to come to land in Israel straight from Egypt as early as this afternoon, maybe to keep a good eye on the cabinet vote. And Donald Trump himself has said that he may be in Israel as early as Sunday. If that is the case, what it's telling us is that he wants to be the one to get credit for the liberation of the hostages. He wants to be here when it happens. If he comes a few days later, it's similar. But Netanyahu is trying to parlay this into his own success and the victory picture that he's wanted to have all along.
And ditto the leaders of Hamas, who will now be enjoying lifelong immunity in relative luxury in Qatar for the rest of their days. So, I mean...
that's one of the most astonishing twists in this twisty war.
And Trump deserves credit. You know, Joe Biden may have put together an identical plan, but they didn't sign up to it, and it didn't stick. Why do you think that attack on Qatar has resonated so violently in the White House? I mean, is it going to be diplomacy that's been brought to bear, or is it... Because Trump's not a big fan of rules and laws and what have you, so it won't be the breach of international law that was the problem. Do we have any idea why that has appeared to be such a big deal breaker for the entire relationship between the White House and Netanyahu?
Yes, we do have some ideas about what happened. Interestingly, James, I'm not sure that this Israeli strike was a breach of international law 100%, because these were terror chieftains who were ensconced in Doha. But it didn't turn out to matter in this case, the law. What did matter is that Qatar was caught surprised, and what mattered even more is that the White House was surprised. I think this was a moment in which we saw on the international stage, not just domestically, Prime Minister Netanyahu's hubris. Remember, again, that he ordered that strike against the advice of his own military leaders. The Israeli army advised against that strike at the time. And Netanyahu decided to undertake it, and he kind of played around with the White House, which is a very dangerous thing to do. He let the Pentagon know at the very last minute, when basically the missiles were already being launched or were a minute away from being launched. And then he leaked to some of his favorite journalists that he had informed that Israel did this alone, but that he had informed the White House in time.
Right.
And I think that the White House was enraged, first of all, because of that manipulation, but more so because of a melange of interests. Donald Trump has very significant personal financial interests with Qatar. Remember that Qatar also bought him a new Air Force One recently. And and the United States has its largest Mideast base by far, its number one base in Qatar.
Yes.
I think Donald Trump was enraged by this lack of courtesy, let's say.
Well, because he took it personally. That's the crucial point. I hadn't thought of it like that. He took it personally. How dare you do this? I've got a base, he would think. Not even we. I've got a base in Qatar.
Exactly. That's what I think we're seeing. Plus, remember, Netanyahu has a complex relationship himself with Qatar, complex and damning.
Yes.
He is the guy who got Qatar to funnel more than $1 billion to Hamas over many years so as to keep Hamas floating in Gaza and thus destroy the Palestinian National Project by keeping Hamas viable as against the Palestinian Authority. His top aides are not only accused of being on the Qatari payroll, his top aides working with him in the Prime Minister's office were simultaneously on the Qatari payroll during this war and are now under arrest for it.
Yes.
But one of the questions that's not in question is that they did receive the money. If they did so legally or illegally seems to be a bit of a question yet. But no one is denying they were paid for by Qatar. So Netanyahu is very complicated with Qatar. And I think he found himself in a kind of pincer with Qatar on the one side, the United States on the other. And remember, Israel is virtually an international pariah now, so he cannot lose Donald Trump.
This is an extraordinary analysis. I should have got you on at 10 o'clock and spared my listeners my own attempts to make sense of the situation and sort of pontificate upon what's... Can I read you a couple of texts? Because it is actually on a personal level. It's lovely to see you looking and sounding so happy, Noga. It really is.
And I'm on no sleep.
Well, that goes with the territory. After all these months, says Simon, you can now hear the joy in Noga's reporting. And Marita says, I love Noga. I appreciate everything she's done over the past 2 years, presenting us with the facts as facts. And I'd add my voice to theirs as well, if I may. And everything crossed for the coming days.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Noga Tarnopolsky, live from Jerusalem with, I'm sure you will agree, an absolutely exceptional analysis of the situation.